Well, the only other people I can think about are like
Yeah, what's up?
Do you need my help? I'm offering my services.
Called XLR cable.
Do we need to leave the speakers for Susan?
Yeah, so people can hear her.
What's going on? Are we doing the 4 hours?
Yeah.
Gotta leave. Oh, all right. Sorry.
So we still need one microphone.
All right.
Yeah. We can use SM50.
We use this one. We use this one that's still hooked up.
SM57. I think that one is.
Hey, good job on your. Thanks, man. Thanks for the inspiration there.
Yeah, no, I really like your
Crap, wrong one. Oh, right one.
Yeah, Ben, you should. So where are we doing it? Right here? Break down so that move all the stuff off those tables.
Where do I move it to?
Now here, unplug everything right there. All the cords ready to go in here. Right here on the outside. See this? All the cords go right here. Yeah. You see that? Right here. Here. Can you do that? Left turn and all that.
are going to start blowing around. Damn them. You know what? That's okay. We're okay. You know, John, when you're ready, we can turn this microphone on. I can kind of begin to talk a little. Are you ready to go Zoom on the YouTube?
I'm already on YouTube, but I gotta get the photos loaded.
Oh, okay. I can go ahead and start talking. Okay. Say when. So I know. He's turning it on. So is it on? John, go ahead and turn it on for me and I'll talk. Okay? Oh, good. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Is it already afternoon yet? I think it might be afternoon or closing in on it. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am going to, I'm here to talk a little bit about sacred space, but before I get started, I just want to say that I have about 100 slides, which gave everyone pause, because how could we talk to 100 slides? We'll be here all day. But the slides are going to run while I'm talking out there in the universe, right? Out on YouTube. And for those of us here, we just ran the pictures off and we're going to pass them around. At one point, I had the pictures organized to kind of follow with what I'm saying to you, but that didn't work out. And so now the photos are just going to circulate and you're going to have to put them where they go, if you know what I mean. And I think you do. So with that, let's see if we're ready to start. Hang on a sec. How are we doing, John? All right. While we wait, they're going to go ahead and we do have, as I say, I have a bunch of pictures because I'm a very visual person. I like to see what people are talking about when they're talking to me. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and John loads the pictures for the people on YouTube. If you're out here with me, pictures are just circulating around. So here we go. I was just talking to somebody who said to me, you know what? This is sacred space for me now, the Grove. Now, I don't know how many services have been out here in the past, but for now, we have made this sacred space, and I don't think it goes away. I think that anytime any of us come back to this space, it's going to be sacred to us. But why is that? Is it because it was already sacred? Is it because we made it sacred? That's the question that's kind of before us as we talk about what is sacred space to us and how is it created, or is it something that exists already? Now, a good working definition of what sacred space is that it's any space or area that's been dedicated or set aside for holy, sacred purposes. So that certainly fits with us here. It's a physical space where the divine can be glimpsed or experienced, and where we feel like we are getting in touch with God, where we can acknowledge that there is something bigger than ourselves and with a greater purpose. And I think that actually fits for here, but it also fits for all our churches that we go into usually. I can name a couple of churches where I didn't feel that, but most churches, you do. These sacred spaces kind of invites our spirits to shift into a different time and a different space, and to experience God and God's word and God's action, because we hunger for that mystery. And we want to have it around us. We want to feel that. And the sacred space celebrates that connection between ourselves and the divine. There's emphasis on sacred space in every religious tradition. All religions have some sort of space set aside as holy that they use to worship in, for meditation, for prayer, and for their rituals. It's something that's been acknowledged from the beginning of time. And you'll see that as you look at pictures, or possibly seeing slides, that I've put in pictures of mountains and of ground and of wells. Because sacred spaces for human beings at the very beginning were not really the altars at all that we think of as an altar. They're places already known to be holy, where people felt the presence of God. And they were places that people began to seek out to pray and connect with God. So think places like Glastonbury Tor, right? Or in the Middle East, there are many monuments. Petra, all kinds of places where, Petra is more of a building, but places where people went. How about Jacob's well, right? Jacob had a sacred well that they're even, Jesus even goes to Jacob's well to spend time to get water and to make a connection, right? To actually do his work at a well. There are sacred mountains. Think of Moses on top of his mountain and bringing back the 10 Commandments to all of us. Think of the roads. I mean, we can always think of Jesus walking to Golgotha, but think about the Camino Santiago. All these places have had sacred meaning for centuries, if not millennia. Think of caves. We can think of wells, all kinds of places that are very sacred to us, but where we most especially, they're sacred simply because we feel the presence of God there. People began to create gardens, but there's probably a place where the Garden of Eden was. We just don't know quite where it was, right? But that's a garden where people felt the presence of God, where Adam and Eve felt the presence of God, where everything was perfect. Eventually, of course, they get driven out, but it gives gardens a particular blessing, it seems to me, that was the first sacred space in the Bible. Oh, I got ahead of myself in my notes. So there we go. We've got the outdoors. But eventually, people become settled, don't they? They settle down. We begin to get more skilled at what we do. And what happens is we begin to build these big edifices. They're buildings. Petra or St. Peter's, St. Paul's. What else? I mean, you can think of a million places that were built, right? Earlier on, it would be the Parthenon. Those are all sacred places, maybe not for us, but for other people. And certainly buildings in Mexico, Teotihuacan, all the big pyramids there, these are all sacred places, sacred buildings that were built to house God, so to speak. When people wanted to bring God into their place and into that moment. So we have churches, we have shrines, we have sanctuaries, chapels, cathedrals. Those would be the Christian ones. But think of Muslims worshiping in their mosques, and there are Jews in their synagogues, and Buddhists and Hindus all call theirs temples. But the point remains the same. It's a place where believers gather together to encounter God in this unique and life-giving way. They give us a place to care for one another and to strengthen one another in our spiritual paths and to give aid and comfort to those in need. Sometimes, as we know, it's a place where a holy person or even God has visited, right? Think of Jerusalem and the Vatican, the Mecca. Those are all shrines. And the presence of a holy person gives it a little bit more character, perhaps. But we have to think about that too. Does it make it more special because that holy person was there? Or is it simply that that place is particularly holy? So God is called into these spaces. Sometimes the spaces are not places where somebody is visited. Sometimes they're places where the holy wasn't necessarily felt. There aren't people out there walking around saying, this is where we need a church. It feels holy. People buy land now and create a building and create a holy space. But you can't create a holy space the way we, say, bake a cake. This is something that we put together, that we do, that we create and becomes holy and divine. It has to be a place that will welcome the possibility of wonder and enlightenment and feed our spiritual souls. And that's what they're all supposed to be. A place where, as Joseph Campbell put it, wonder can be revealed. Cathedrals, churches, all these places are wonderful examples of how we do this. We can walk into a cathedral and suddenly feel the presence of God, even if, it has never had a holy person in it except for us, because we're all holy, aren't we? I think particularly of Grace Cathedral right now. It's sitting up on the top of one of the highest places in San Francisco. It's a beautiful, beautiful spot, often right above the fog, so you don't get fog all day. What was really there originally was a mansion of a very, very wealthy person that crashed down and was destroyed in the earthquake. And the family decided they didn't want to live there anymore, and they gave the land to the church, and they built a cathedral there. So in a way, it probably didn't feel so holy or sacred when they left it, but it becomes holy and sacred by all the work and all the energy and all the people that have come into it. All the services, the music, all these things work together to create a place that's holy. But we have to recognize that, don't we? Have you ever been in a church that didn't feel holy? I mean, I have. I walked into Notre Dame and kept thinking, no, I'm not getting it here. I just wasn't there for Notre Dame. Now, you put me into Sainte-Chapelle across the river, and I loved Sainte-Chapelle. That was where I felt God. Something else to think about. This has to do with how we find God, how we connect to the divine and the sacred. Now, what if we decide that we want this in our home, which is absolutely what we want? Isn't this a great thought, to bring God into our home? And how do we do that? How do we create this space in our own home? There's a way in which it's already sacred, and it already has God in it, simply because you are made in the image of God. And as the image of God, you're going to be a part of, the image of God is in there just by simply your presence, your holiness, your blessedness. But are there places in your own house that feel like home? So if you look through the pictures, you'll see that there are homes. I asked for people to send me their sacred space. So David, are the pictures? The pictures are kind of just sitting here, but maybe we could make them move around a little bit, so people can have a chance to see, say, Rosie's spot and Danny's spot, all these places. And I have a couple of mine in there as well. Again, if you want to find that space, it's going to take your taking the time, or us taking the time, our taking the the sense of God with us into our house and finding that place. Lots of people have them already. You probably already have a sacred space in your house. You probably even have an altar in your house, and you may not know it. I'm thinking of those little gatherings on dressers, right? Of all the pictures of your ancestors or your mom or your dad. I'm thinking when you grouped all those angels together, or when I grouped all those angels together. I'm thinking of the time when I found this broken gargoyle. His wing was broken off, out on the street to be taken away in the trash. And I brought him home and I saved his life. And he sits way up high on a shelf in my house. That's how I could see by looking at him there on the street that he was sacred and blessed, and he needed a home. He needed to be healed. And he brings that into my home. He reminds me not just of the sacred, but just having him there is a way of not only recognizing God in my home, recognizing that God is there, but there's a way in which it settles my soul. It helps me to connect to God. It reminds me to say my prayers and to think of other people, not just myself. I'm there all by myself all day with 2 barky dogs, and I need something that pulls me out of myself and reminds me of the sacred and the divine and of others that are out there in the world that need my time, my energy, and my prayers. And that's what my sacred space does for me. I also sit there and say my prayers early in the morning. But sometimes I need to go and say my prayers in the midst of the day or later in the day. You know, we can't often control the external environments around us, especially our work and our neighborhoods. But within our power, we have the power to change our environments at home. And I think the quality of our spiritual lives, both inside our houses and out in the world, is enhanced and deepened when we do this, when we create that space. I created one space to begin with, but have you found this? I know you're all people of God. Have you found that suddenly there's another space over here that has become sacred, and then another one? When the grandchildren were here last week, they said to me, "You have 3 altars in this house." And I said, "I do." And then they came back and they said, well, they wanted to build an altar for Barbie. And I said, absolutely. So there is an altar in there for Barbie. You get to guess which one it is. We have altars all through our houses. And the way they spread their energy and their divinity is delicious. It is a wonderful feeling to have them sprinkled throughout the house. And nobody needs to know that they're your sacred space even. They can just be there. Sometimes they're perfectly obvious, as you'll see with the Hispanic ones. The Hispanic altars are fabulous, aren't they? They're glorious in all their color and vividness. And then others have altars that are quiet and peaceful and gentle. It's all what feeds your soul and your body and your mind and brings God into you and connects you to God, but also to the whole world. I'm particularly fond of all these shrines of Mary. You can probably tell that, can't you, from looking at the pictures. I'm particularly fond of those shrines that we find out on the roadside, that people have erected as memorials or even just as a salute to Mary. They're often very elaborate, and then others are far more tasteful. Maybe not tasteful is not the right word, but you understand what I mean. More traditional, maybe we would say. They're taking the sacred out into the world instead of just keeping it at home or in your garden, right? With your fountain or whatever you've put in your garden. Lots of people have their sacred space outside where they say their prayers early in the morning. but they've begun to take them outside. It creeps out into the world, which is just exactly what I think it ought to do. This is how I want to finish up. I want to finish up by suggesting something that seems far-fetched and absolutely impossible. But if you listened to the sermon this morning and you listened to our collects, you heard Sam telling us about how God is all through the world. And I believe that sincerely. God was here before we got here. God is out on that street, whether we're out there or not. And whether anyone has ever said a prayer on that road or whether a holy person has driven on it. God is throughout the world, not in that pantheistic way where we need to start worshiping the roads and the trees, but in that panentheistic way where, we'll wait for them, in that panentheistic way, apparently they don't agree with me, where God remains God. God is there. God is our creator, but this earth is God's creation. We know this. And if this is God's creation, then God is in everything, even in the trash, even in the garbage, even the ugliest place. We know this about people, right? We know that everyone has God in them, no matter how difficult or perfectly evil they may be. But now, what if we begin to think of the whole world that way? Knowing that God has created this thing, everything. Those are creations of God. And then how do we want to hold on to that? How do we want to spread that around? How do we want to take that out into the world? And how does that change the way we think about the world? Because then we have to start remembering, if we do mining, we're digging into God. It's kind of like the body of God out there. There's a theologian by the name of Sally McFague who has been somewhat controversial, but she has a very panentheistic idea about God. She writes this: "As I have come to realize that we all live and move and have our being in God, the names of each person, species, creature, and element are superimposed over God's name, God's reality. God is reality. God is the source of reality of each of us. Panentheism, seeing the world as in God, puts God's names first, but each of our names are included and preserved and in their distinctiveness and within that divine reality." Think how this shifts our understanding of how we treat the earth, about how we think about mining and waterways as dumps, and how we treat animals, and all these things. It's a whole shifting of our understanding of what's around us and of God. Perhaps beginning to recognize God in our own beloved spaces will be the beginning of our returning the whole earth to that Garden of Eden, right? This is where we're all headed. This is what we're all working toward bringing God into the world and in all living creatures. We are here to create heaven on earth and to return us to the Garden of Eden. And blessed be his glorious name forever, and may the whole earth be filled with his glory. Amen. Amen. So, if you have questions, I'm happy to take questions. I am by no means an expert on this. It's just one of my great loves. But I brought a couple of things with me. So first of all, I want to say that I have always been kind of, the well thing, sacred wells, didn't really resonate with me, shall we say, until one of my parishioners went to Ephesus and to St. Mary's house, and they knew how much I loved St. Mary. And there's a well in the basement. Who's been there? Has anybody been there? Have you been there? There's a well, and you're allowed to take water from the well. But you have to have a container. So this is the container they brought me holy water in from the well, which to me is just delicious. This is wonderful. Now, the problem is, I'm pretty sure the children have drunk out of it, because when I pulled it out this morning, it is a lot emptier than I remember. So apparently it also doesn't hurt you if you drink it. I've now put this, my rosary on it, hoping that they won't drink it in the future. And then this, I don't know how many, I should stand over here. I don't know how many of you are, spend much time with the Hispanic culture, but in the Hispanic culture, they love to put milagros on the cross. And this one has the love of God. It has a heart on it, and it has a person, and it has an arm and a leg, and a person kneeling, and then Mary right in the center. And this is something that hangs in my office actually right now. But the idea is that these milagros on here, if you have a foot that's bothering you, Rosie, you would have a cross with this leg on it, or you could even have just your foot. This is the idea. So this one was made for me to just, not that I think because I broke my leg, but at church. So anyway, those are some of the favorites of mine, and some of my favorite stories. I have tons of stories about them. Anyway, thank you for your attention. Thank you for staying late, and thank you for staying online. Bless your hearts. Do you have any questions? Wait. Oh, come up here and talk. Do you mind? They want to hear you. They don't want to hear me. They've heard enough of me.
I just wanted to just give thanks for this sacred space right here.
Yes.
Which has helped save us during this time.
Right. Absolutely.
That's all.
Thank you for that. Yes, thank you. Yes. So now we have a sacred space that we can come back to, right? Whenever we wish. We don't have to wait for the church to arrive. It'll be sacred. And did you see the cicada sitting on my foot most of the service? It sat on my foot most of the service, and so I think it's a holy cicada. Anyway, I had to take it off because I had to move around, and I didn't want it to get smashed. So he's in the tree over here, so he'll no doubt join the chorus shortly. Anyway, thank you. All right. And I brought some sacred items. All right. Thanks, John. You're the best. I better take my water before anybody drinks it.